Fear me, if you dare. Pray for mercy from Puss. Hold on a minute. In boots that I need to put on. In a boot. I need to put both boots on to count. In boots that need to be tied. In boots that are tied. We've all enjoyed Puss in Boots as a character in the Shrek franchise since Shrek 2, right? The parody of Zorro, based on the Italian folklore character. Yeah, who'd have thought that a character whose main running thing is that he's Spanish came from a character who is Italian. Just as well, Antonio Banderas himself voices the character in the English and Spanish and Italian dubs. Starting off as an ogre-killing bounty hunter, Puss became a trustworthy ally to Shrek and Donkey on various adventures. The character was such a commercial success, he eventually gained his own spin-off movie and Netflix series. And a few other things, like the Three Diablos, but I've never seen that. The general consensus on the first Puss in Boots spin-off movie was that it wasn't as good as the first two Shrek movies, but it was significantly better than Shrek the Third and Shrek Forever After. I mean, I remember enjoying it with a friend of mine in the cinema. It had its fun moments. I remember watching it several times on DVD, as we did with a lot of DVDs in our youth. The film itself delved more into Puss in Boots' outlaw life, his friendship, his frenemy friendship with Humpty Dumpty, him meeting his lover Kitty Softpaws, which is important for later on in this review, and a story of how Puss in Boots as an outlaw manages to clear his own name. That movie was a lot of fun, but for the standards of DreamWorks animation, a lot of people consider Puss in Boots to be a fine movie. With arguably one exception, many people thought that the villains of this movie were not really that memorable compared to other villains that came before, especially in the Shrek franchise. And so despite the moderately well-received success of the spin-off Puss in Boots film, there had been a lot of people trying to work on the sequel to the spin-off Puss in Boots movie for some time. And this had gone on for so long, a hiatus, that this project went through production hell, even changing the name of the film. Now, I'm gonna be honest, if it wasn't for the internet hype surrounding Puss in Boots The Last Wish, I would have assumed that this film would have been about as memorable as another spin-off sequel, Spirit Untamed. I mean, we all love DreamWorks Animation. They are one of the few entertainment companies in which, aside from some exceptions, have kept making quality pieces of animated movie making. However, their spin-off movies and their spin-off television shows aren't exactly what you would call that memorable, at least compared to what came before. There are some exceptions in the spin-off lineup of DreamWorks' movie making. There was Joseph, King of Dreams, a prequel to The Prince of Egypt. Come on, let's be honest. In terms of DreamWorks' lineup, nothing will ever top The Prince of Egypt. Come on. There were several Christmas and other holiday-related specials for various franchises. Kung Fu Panda had its fun of lore expanding in its television show expansions. And of course, a lot of people warmly received the first spin-off Puss in Boots film. Not to a high degree, but enough to say they liked it just fine. However, a lot of the other spin-off media, like that one How to Train Your Dragon television series, was not really well received. That was the kind of quality that, if it wasn't for the internet hype, I would have been expecting from a movie like this. But boy, was that assumption proven wrong, because judging by the adverts and what people have been talking about it, the animation seemed to have taken some major inspiration from Into the Spider-Verse, with its vibrant colors and stylized imagery and high-energy action scenes. From what people have been talking about, the animation seems to have taken major inspiration from Into the Spider-Verse, with its vibrant colors, stylized imagery, and high-energy action scenes. This is likely due in part to the fact that one of the three directors responsible for this movie was one of the directors who worked on Into the Spider-Verse. So no wonder the direction is on point in this film, with its emphasis on key frames, with some exaggerated posing in a static manner to emphasize the movements. And especially with this clever use of combining 2D animation within the CGI work to emphasize the energy of motion blurs and other key visuals like milk pouring and other things like that. It's not that the more grounded and realistic look of the previous Puss in Boots film, and by extent the whole Shrek franchise up until this point, had been bad in any way. No. That's part of Shrek's identity. It's the foundation of this movie to exist in the first place. It's just that the animation department has clearly taken inspiration and respect of what came before and doing something a bit new with it. This makes for a true visual spectacle, but the animation alone would not be enough if the story was of poor quality. But oh boy, this story not only surpasses the original, it is quite frankly one of the best films of 2022, yet for some reason America got to see it in cinemas first, and only just about now the UK is catching up with the film being released in the UK as of February 2023. Oh my days. I would have gladly have called this film the best film of 2022, but the UK didn't get the chance to see the sequel until February 2023. Seriously, what is it with America getting to see animated sequels like The Incredibles 2 long before the UK even gets to have a chance to see it in cinemas? What's with that? I mean, it's not quite as strange as that bizarre tradition of America having differently titled names for some movies. I mean, Americans and British people share the same language, for the most part. A lot of people online have been saying, this is the best film DreamWorks Animation has made in years. The story is so great. Oh, really? So what kind of themes does this apparently great movie delve into? Well, you see, the film delves into themes of regret and mortality and the fear of the inevitability of death and counting the blessings of your life as a result of that and learning how to overcome the fear of death. And the best part is, for a family movie, they really up the stakes and they don't hold back on some of the tough subject matter, which really drives a lesson home for the kids as well as for the adults in the audience. Holy moly! Did DreamWorks really go that far? DreamWorks didn't need to go that hard, but they did, and I love it! This is the DreamWorks that I love. The kind of DreamWorks that's not afraid to delve into topics like this. I mean, I appreciate when animated films delve into this kind of subject matter because their creative imagery can lead to so much storytelling potential that's not usually achievable in live action. Because animation usually does a better job with key visuals and symbolism and expressions. It can all point to a great foundation of goodness. Okay, enough raving on. What is the story of Puss in Boots: The Last Wish all about? So, you all know Puss in Boots. He's this extravagant hero, and as shown in this film, he loves the attention. He loves the status of being a legendary hero. And one of his perks of being a cat, being in a fairy tale world, where it's mainly based around folktales, is that Puss in Boots, and presumably all other cats, have 9 lives. So every time Puss dies, he will get a few more lives to spare. In this case, Puss has an extravagant heroic opening where he plays a song at a pub, or mansion? He puts on a party, he fights a few guys, and even takes out a giant, almost akin to Attack on Titan style, if it got inspiration from Into the Spider-Verse. If Miles Morales was replaced with a ginger cat in boots, and a hat, and a sword. Unfortunately, Puss, being a bit too arrogant, he gets crushed off guard and is now on his last life. At first, Puss doesn't really take this very seriously, until he has a close encounter with death. Quite literally. And yes, I do literally mean death. I don't mean it metaphorically, or poetically, or rhetorically, or theoretically, or any of those fancy terms. I mean death. Straight up. And Jesus has overcome death. Yay! But I'll get more into that certain character later. What matters is that for the first time in his life, at least as far as this movie is concerned, Puss is beginning to experience real crippling anxiety about his mortality. You see, as it turns out, throughout this movie, Puss had grown so fond of his legendary status, he feared giving it up. he feared that self-idolization being destroyed. You see, Puss had grown so fond of the self-idolization of his legendary status that he feared losing it, even to the point of neglecting a simple life, because he loved that legendary status for so long. Now here comes this crippling reality where Puss in Boots, as a folklore cat, is down to his last life, and now he is afraid of the very kind of danger he would once dive headfirst into. So he retreats to a retirement home to live out miserably for the rest of his days. However, Puss overhears about an opportunity of finding a map which can lead to a fallen star which can grant one wish. Puss sees this as an opportunity to wish back his 9 lives so that he can keep up his legendary status. However, he's not the only one trying to get this one wish. There are a few other parties, such as Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, the greedy Jack Horner and his pie baking company, accompanied by a hysterically hilarious rendition of Jiminy Cricket. This is horrible! You're horrible! You're an irredeemable monster! Honestly, that voice is funny. All these different parties, and Puss in Boots, who is teaming up with an adorable dog, as well as his former lover Kissy? As well as his former lover Kitty Softpaws, all race towards the wishing star, which is found within the dark forest, to see who can get there first and get their wish. All this happening whilst Puss in Boots is dealing with his crippling anxiety about the fear of death. And Puss learning over time, learning how to value his life. Because what this film brilliantly does with its dark subject matter and the themes that they imply is teaching audiences young and old to appreciate their lives. I'm sure if John Kramer saw this film, he would give it 2 thumbs up.
Most people are so ungrateful to be alive, but not you. Not anymore.
And this is where the film rather brilliantly portrays a positive message of counting what blessings you do have in your life, rather than pointlessly trying to pursue for something which you quite frankly already have. I mean, that sounds like The Wizard of Oz, but honestly, I think this fairy tale delves into that kind of subject matter in a far more nuanced and better way, if you ask me. It's a straight-up biblical virtue, you know, counting your blessings and not being so self-worshipping, but rather being thankful towards what others have provided for you and what blessings you do have in your life. And there's a message that's a wee bit empowering in the fact that whilst it is inevitable that death will come for us all, regardless of how you view life, the film also teaches that if you begin to embrace a lifestyle of counting your blessings, and if you hold on to that source of the eternal good light, you'll begin to overcome your fear of death. Not necessarily by... It's ultimately a film that teaches you that whatever is good, think on those things. And this message is all the more powerful because these characters are, for the most part, are just so compelling. Yeah, one of the few gripes that many people will have with this movie is that some characters probably needed a bit more screen time for more development. But thankfully, they do have enough screen presence to justify the message that this film is trying to portray. So I suppose in a metaphysical way, in a meta-narrative kind of way, what screen time all these characters do have makes me thankful for what they have been able to provide for the story. I wish there was more screen time, but then again, Puss wished he could extend his lifespan. In a way, I wish there was more screen time for these characters, but at the same time, Puss in Boots wished he could expand his 9 lifespans. On the one hand, I wish many of these characters had more screen time, but on the other hand, Puss in Boots did wish to expand his 9 lifespans, and in a meta-narrative kind of way, most of these characters, especially one particular villain, makes a longer-lasting impression. Hold on a second, no wait. The characterization of these characters is superb, absolutely spot on. Like, the writing is just absolutely brilliant for this film. I mean, Puss in Boots, he was already a likable character as he was, but this film gave Puss in Boots some really great emotional stakes that made him learn to overcome something. And overcome something personal, and that kind of story usually makes for some of the best kind of stories you can ever make. The stories where it's personal and the characters have to overcome something. And the way Puss has to deal with anxiety, even to the extent of having a straight up anxiety attack at one scene, it really does make it quite engaging, and a lot of audience members, including myself, could relate to Puss, especially during his anxiety attack and how his dog friend managed to help calm him down. There are a lot of things in life that can make us anxious. For some, it could be some physical things like bills and debts or health issues. For others, it could be mental issues like depression or mental strain or OCD and other things like that. Or spiritually speaking, it could be this long sense of dread of some kind. But we eventually learn to overcome these things by recognizing that anyone can be redeemed if they choose to. And this is something I've had to learn in my personal life. I've certainly been suffering from a bit of anxiety. However, I've also learned that, especially very recently as of recording this, that as long as someone wants to be redeemed, they can be. The only possible way to not be redeemed is to not want redemption. Of course, someone's not going to be redeemed if they don't want redemption, but if a person is willing and wants to be redeemed, they can be. That's something I've learned as of late. It was a very hard lesson to learn, but looking back now, I think perhaps the experience was necessary. Much like what Puss was going through here, Puss needed that edge, and the film, in that matter, needed to be as dark as it was at points in order to drive home that message of learning how to overcome personal fears and sensing a great blessing in your life as a result. Now, keep in mind, and I think this film portrays this brilliantly, Puss's fear of death does not entirely go away. And this is something I'm still learning, is that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the overcoming of fear. So Puss may still be afraid of dying, presumably by the end of this movie. However, the difference between Puss in Boots at the beginning of this movie and Puss in Boots at the end of this movie is that Puss in the end learns that life's not centered around him and that he really should count his blessings. Puss is not a god, so Puss logically cannot overcome death. They make it quite clear that death will come back to retrieve Puss in the end. But the difference is that Puss is not taking his life for granted anymore. He now sees it as a blessing. And that's why death, as portrayed in this film, was coming after him in the first place, was because Death as a character was just so sick and tired of seeing Puss not counting his blessings throughout his 9 whole lifespans. So logically, if Puss is not counting the blessings of his life throughout his previous 8 lives, why should he do so with his final life? So Death pushes Puss to the limit with the intent to kill him. And there's nothing Puss can do about it unless Puss overcomes his fear of his own mortality. Amongst all of us human beings, mortal human beings who were part of the creation, all of us are going to die. That sounds like a nihilistic message, because it is true, but what's also true is that that doesn't have to be the end of the story. There is a part of us that lives on forever. There is a part of us that can overcome this part of life. And I'm so grateful that films like this exist. Honestly, looking back now, I guess alongside Pixar's Inside Out, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is one of the best films to delve into the topic of anxiety. So for that reason alone, I think I'm going to give Puss in Boots: The Last Wish a 10.9 out of 12. I do have just some minor issues with this film, such as the lack of screen time for certain characters, but to be fair, that's probably really scraping the bottom of the barrel just due to how excellently written the story is, as well as how well animated this is. Oh yeah, also there was a post-credit scene, or at least there was a rumor of a post-credit scene.
Oh, you're still here?
You bet I am.
Windowsill without a sound.
He lied to me.
Scott Meyer signing out. God bless you all.